Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Plant-Based Transformation Summit. This is our third annual event. My name is Margot Freitag, and I am your host. I am really excited to bring to you the most current information about the ultimate solution to the vast majority of our health issues, our weight issues, our vitality, our happiness, and that, of course, is a whole foods, a plant-based diet. And today I am so excited to introduce you to Dr. Will Tuttle, who is joining us again this year. We're so excited about that. So Dr. Tuttle is the author of The World Peace Diet. He has traveled the world speaking to audiences about the power of a vegan diet for our health, for our earth, and for the animals that we share the planet with. He shares the importance of setting ourselves free from the conventions that we're taught from early childhood, and how compassion, love, acceptance, and gratitude are essential elements of happiness and peace and emulate the real meaning of veganism. Welcome, Dr. Tuttle.
Great. Thank you, Margot. And thank you, everyone, for joining us.
It's so great to have you back with us again this year.
Right. Yeah, it's great to be with you. And I think this is, the most important work we can be doing right now.
Absolutely. I wondered maybe we could just jump right in, and maybe you can tell us what you've been up to this past year, where you've been speaking, who you've been influencing, and what kind of change do you see in our world right now and in this movement towards a healthier and more compassionate way of living.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Since the last year, Madeline and I have been doing a lot of traveling and giving lectures throughout North America, quite a bit, mainly on the West Coast, although also in New York. But the big thing for us was this past few months, we were in Europe, also in India and in China. And we did a very busy tour. We had 66 days, 75 events in over 40 cities. And it was great. Just briefly, like, for example, in London, we went to Spain, also Switzerland, but in London's become really quite a powerful vegan place. And I spoke at the Veg Fest there in London, which brought about 15,000 people. They have over 100 vegan restaurants now in London. It's by far the number one in the world. And they even had a whole day of a vegan marketing. So they had companies that are making vegan cheeses and clothes and leather and all these things, a special day for that. So it was just inspiring, really, to see the creativity and the enthusiasm, and to see all over Europe, actually, the vegan movement growing very quickly. And then we flew from London to Mumbai, and we did a 10-day, I guess it was 12 days in 10 cities all over India. Every day we did one or two events. And again, the vegan movement in India has ancient roots in vegetarianism, but veganism is pretty new because the dairy piece is so ingrained in their culture. So I was warned ahead of time that it would be kind of hard, perhaps, but we were very pleasantly surprised. For example, in Mumbai, I was able to speak at the kickoff of an 18-day vegan festival with over 100 events in Mumbai, vegan cooking classes, lectures by vegan coaches and authors and so forth, including this wonderful young man we met who was the first vegan ever to climb to the summit of Mount Everest. And so it was just fantastic to be able to be part of that. And then we traveled to Mangalore and Bangalore and Chennai and Calcutta and Hyderabad and Surat and Delhi and Pune and all these places. We worked with local vegan groups, and there are definitely vegan restaurants sprouting up, and the movement, I think, is growing quickly. One man said something I thought was interesting. He said he thinks that once veganism catches on in India, it will grow faster in India than anywhere in the world, which I can see why that might be true, in the sense that they have already a wonderful foundation philosophically of ahimsa, the ancient Sanskrit word that means nonviolence. So people get it. It's just the dairy is such a difficult thing, and they've been under the influence a lot, I think, of Western agribusiness and chemical companies, and so they're working hard to in a sense, go back to the roots of a more sustainable and healthy way of living. So that was very inspiring. And then we flew from there to Taiwan, Hong Kong, and mainland China. This was actually the third time in just 1 year that I've been to China, mainland China, lecturing. And very inspiring to see the very fast growth of the vegan movement in China. Taiwan, you maybe heard me say, I think is probably the most vegan-friendly country in the world.
Right.
They really have hundreds of vegan and vegetarian restaurants, health food stores, and just a huge vegan movement. And it pervades the whole culture, really. Because Buddhism is so well recognized and respected, and the Buddhist monks are basically all vegans. So they're always teaching and promoting veganism to the people. So, but the same thing is happening in mainland China. And so we were very inspired to travel to many different cities and all over China, giving lectures and seeing, for example, Confucianism. I didn't realize, but there's like a Confucian center in the center of China, in a city called Chufu, which was actually the birthplace of the historical Confucius, which we call Confucius. But they are building. They have 4,000 acres of land. They're putting millions of dollars into this huge vegan organic community, totally vegan, totally organic, with a philosophy of harmony with nature, with animals, with each other, and it's really happening. So it was great to see that. And also to just see the vitality of the vegan movement, how creative people are, how well they cooperate with each other. We spoke to huge groups. I mean, there was always at least 400 or 500, up to 800 people in the audiences. And we got a lot of mass media, radio, television, newspaper. The Times of India, when we were in India, which is the New York Times, essentially did 3 different articles on veganism and interviewing me for those. And so it was great to be able to reach literally millions of people with the message and to see how positive it is. China is the only country in the world where the government is actually recommending and mandating that people reduce the amount of meat they're eating. So I think it's important to remember that we're part of a movement that's growing, that has deep roots within humanity's philosophical traditions. You know, in China, you go back to these ancient Buddhist monasteries, and we spoke in some of these monasteries where they invented vegan meats, right? They had these wealthy mentors that would come to the temple and they would want to eat some meat, but the monks were all vegans, and so they made the very first plant-based pork and duck and chicken and so forth. And so they've been doing this for hundreds of years. And I think we should really think in positive terms about our neighbors on this planet, the people in cultures all over the world who really have the same kind of awareness and heart beating in them for a better world, for their children, for themselves, and are really doing something about it. They're not just sitting around talking about it. They're really working hard. And I think in China, there's some great cooperation actually with the government there. We saw massive tree planting campaigns. I mean, they are planting trees, hundreds and hundreds, thousands and thousands of acres. I mean, all over China. It's really an explosion of effort to reduce air pollution, to reduce water pollution, water depletion, to increase forest cover. And so it's really a lot we can learn, I think, from these cultures. And we don't hear about a lot of this in the mainstream media.
So despite these, ancient roots of veganism, especially in the Eastern countries and philosophies, why is there's such a movement today? What's going on that's making this, why is there such a...
Right. I think there's 3 things kind of coming together. Well, 2 things for sure, but one of them is basically science. I mean, science, it just says over and over again on every level that eating animal foods is bad for our health, right? I mean, we know saturated fat and cholesterol and acidifying and inflammatory animal protein are the driving force behind diabetes and osteoporosis and liver and kidney disease and heart disease and cancer and all these things. So that's just so obvious, and it's getting out there. So science is, and also the connection with global climate destabilization, with rainforest destruction, with world hunger. I mean, the scientific foundation from the environmental point of view, from the health point of view, and also really scientists are now declaring openly, which they didn't do even a few years ago, that animals are conscious, that they're the subjects of their lives, that their suffering is significant to them. And so there's no longer this sort of hiding behind this idea that science, well, we just don't know, we're not really sure. I mean, it's so absurd, and it's understood scientifically that animals are capable of complex awareness and and are sensitive. So science is helpful. Number two, I think is really helpful is young people. I see this movement. People who are young are much more concerned about their future. I mean, I think we should all be concerned, but I just notice this wonderful creativity and energy coming from young people. And so I think that's also kicking in. And social media and networking and YouTube videos and the kind of things we're doing, summits, anything that can help raise awareness. And so this grassroots kind of connectiveness through social media and through YouTube and so forth, I think is connecting up a lot of young people to the significance of this whole situation, that animal violence towards animals is also violence towards human beings, towards hungry people, towards slaughterhouse workers, towards the future generations. And then the final thing is that there are more and more people just creating vegan products. So economically, it's becoming more accepted. A lot of the big meat and dairy industries are beginning to buy out vegan companies and market those products because they realize the future actually is vegan in terms of if we're going to have a future. And not that I'm any big fan of corporations and capitalism, but in a sense, there is more investment flowing and it's becoming more accepted as the only way we're going to have a future. Right. And we even see governmental agencies also moving in the direction to support them, clearly in China, clearly in Taiwan. And I think we'll see that more happening as well.
So I'm really curious about India and the dairy piece. I mean, it's religious. It's very fundamental and ingrained.
Right.
And I wondered what was the response? What did people say?
Well, the thing about the dairy in India is that it has such deep roots and it has such respect. Krishna was the lover of the cowgirls, and it's almost like the holy sacred milk. You can't take that away, Yeah. And but basically, I think people are becoming aware. There's a wonderful woman there, for example, Nandita Shah. She's a doctor, and she's doing a lot of education tirelessly about the health destruction. India now has the highest diabetes rate in the world. So it's becoming obvious that they cannot be eating all this dairy. There was something called the White Revolution. I didn't know about that, but in the 1970s, mainly into the 80s, the Indian government just did this huge, put billions of dollars into what is called the White Revolution, which was to promote dairy in India, just to try to get farmers growing more grain to feed to cows and having more cows. And people, they said they were told, I'm not sure who told them, but they were told that the Indian people were just not getting enough milk. So that governmental push, I think, really, and now there's what's called the Red Revolution in India, which is the big push for meat. You have McDonald's and Burger King and so forth really moving in. So it's very difficult right now in India in the sense that the corporations, the financial institutions are pushing hard because there's so much money, unfortunately, in sick people and in selling this stuff. Mm-hmm. But I kept hammering away, and there's a lot of people that understand this on the idea of ahimsa, that nonviolence is the foundation of Hinduism, really Buddhism, Jainism, and the native Indian traditions. And nonviolence always includes animals in these traditions. It's not like in the West where nonviolence is only to people and animals don't count. And in India they do count. But we saw terrible suffering, and we saw a lot of cows wandering with homeless and eating trash, and dogs that were clearly, just dying in the streets and so forth. So there is, a lot of poverty in India, a lot of just suffering is right in your face. Mm-hmm. But the people in general, and I think the spiritual traditions, like the yoga traditions, are coming around slowly to realize that dairy is counterproductive, that it's harmful to the earth, to ecosystems, and it's also not in the best interest of farmers. That's the last holdup. People think that we need to have dairy because of the farmers. They have a few cows and that kind of helps them economically. Mm-hmm. But we're seeing the real studies that are done scientifically that the farmers are not helped by this, that really they have to feed the cows, they have to grow grain to feed them, and they're locked in a terrible struggle too. So moving to a plant-based diet is the best thing for the Indian people, and this is being educated more and more. There's more and more groups. We worked with local groups. There are some great local groups in India. There's the Sattvic Vegan Society, who the founder of that took us around all over India, and other large, really grassroots groups that are educating people about the benefits. It's mostly young people. But I think the idea is that dairy had its time, and the research is really clear that anthropologically, that the warriors that invaded India probably 2,000, 3,000 years ago were cattle herders that had these sky gods, and they're the ones that brought the dairy thing in, and they created the Vedas that said you've got to sacrifice the animals to the gods, you've got to drink their milk, and that this was really something that was sort of brought in, and and it's obsolete basically. I mean, whatever. Maybe if 4,000 or 5,000 years ago people had to do that, for some reason, but today we can see it's a waste of resources, causing a lot of trouble, and so it's time to question those things, and that's what veganism offers, this wonderful alternative.
So it's really interesting, there seems to be this movement. It's not one thing. It's the whole piece. So it's the ethical piece, the health piece, the environmental piece, and these three forces seem to be working together. And for me, I mean, when I think back when I sort of made this switch to plant-based diet, I was always since the early childhood a huge animal lover. And, but there was like this unconscious wall of disconnect. And when I made the changes for my health, that wall kind of came tumbling down. And then there was this evolution of self that occurred, I would say, which really made that transition simple. It was really clear to me that there was not going to be any waffling, because one reason supported the other reason. And, I wonder if you could speak to that. That was easy for me, but it's not easy for everyone. And I guess I wanted to ask you, what do you see what do you see happening to people when that light bulb goes on? So obviously they suddenly get it, they get the connection, but some people struggle still and some people don't. So can you just speak to that a little bit?
Right. I think, essentially, what we're thinking about when we're thinking about veganism, and we're also thinking about food in general and eating meat and dairy and so forth, we're thinking about culturally indoctrinated behavior. And we're talking about living in a world where we've been just required from the time we're little infants to participate in these meals. We're born, we get our mother's breast if we're lucky, and then at a certain point, we start eating solid food, and go to any grocery store, you'll see turkey and veal and chicken and beef. So this is forced upon us. We have to eat this, and we don't know what it is. So we're compelled to eat foods that really are not in our best interest physically, we know, but also psychologically. So I think this really reduces our sensitivity and also reduces our intelligence, on the deep sense of intelligence as the capacity to make meaningful connections as individuals and as a society, because every meal is teaching us, don't make the connection, just stay shallow, just eat, just follow the program, eat the food, don't think about where it came from. And so as a whole society, we're basically locked together because meals cross-culturally are the primary way that people bond together. They're the main ritual in any society. And so when anyone questions this, it sends up red flags in a sense in everyone's mind, and they don't want to go there. They don't want to be different. We want to be able to go to the church potluck or the company barbecue or the Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner, whatever it is, and not be different. We want to be well liked and well loved and fit in and be part of the crowd and be accepted. We're tribal on that level. So I think essentially, even though veganism is the most rational thing and the most logical thing, if we were really rational and logical, we'd all go vegan. There wouldn't be any fighting about it. But the thing is, we're not. As human beings, we're much more social creatures, social beings. And we're also very empathic, and we have an intuition, I think a spiritual or in a sense, a transcendent awareness or the capacity for a higher understanding. And I think most people go vegan really not because of logic. That may be why they tell people that, but at a deeper level, it's because we make a connection, and we make a connection either with animals or we make a connection with basic violence in our world, and we see the suffering that animals go through. We suddenly see a piece of meat for what it actually is, as the leg of an animal who wanted to live, or the breast of an animal. I mean, once we see that. So I think what we try to do in our work is support people in the kind of adventure that you just described, where we begin to connect the dots, and we begin to, in a sense, leave the prison and open the door and walk out into the fresh air of a new tomorrow, where we see that it's great for our health. It's wonderful for animals, for ecosystems, for future generations, for our society, for hungry people. On every level, it's actually helping. And we then understand, I think it's important to understand the history of this. I talk about that a lot in the World Peace Diet, how we began herding animals 10,000 years ago, and that created a society that emerged out of that, that is still in existence today. We still live in a herding society, which requires us to have a religion and have medicine and have education that all supports herding animals. So we don't get this anywhere. How do we get it? We have to go to places like right here, a summit online, to find out an alternative way of viewing the world that's liberating for us and for animals and for everyone. So it's really, this whole effort, I think, of self-inquiry and questioning, why am I on this earth actually, and what is my purpose, and what is my connection and relationship with the larger order. And these are natural questions to us, but we're taught in our society not to ask those questions. We're taught that these questions have already been answered. You know who you are, you have a name, you have a function, you're supposed to buy more and get more, and that's what you're supposed to do. Don't think about it. This is what we're told continually. We're bombarded with messages to go back to sleep. And veganism is really a call to wake up, and to wake up out of this cultural trance that, in a sense, is imposed on all of us. And the main way this cultural trance gets its hooks into us at a very deep level, right into our cells, is through the meat and dairy program, because the food is our most intimate connection, with everything, with our culture, with nature. And so if we don't question food, we're not really questioning things. We may think we're progressive. We may think we're really questioning things and so forth. But if we're still eating animal foods, it exposes a major disconnect of if we can't. I mean, that is where the rubber meets the road, as they say. That's where the real impact happens. And so I think the two things are this individual effort, this individual journey or adventure of discovery. And then also number two is community, creating the communities to support this. The only reason anyone eats animal foods are because of the communities we're raised in, so we're products of our communities. And if we can create alternative communities that support compassion and awareness and making connections and being conscious, then we're creating communities of healing. And I think that's what we're doing with this summit. We're creating a community, an online community of healing, where we can connect with what the whole truth is. That's what the word heal comes from, the word whole. And it means to look at it, beyond the surface level, to see the bigger picture. Yeah. And I think it's important, as even if we're already a vegan, we think, I'm already a vegan, I'm living that way. It's important to realize that that's not the end. That's just the beginning. We still have a long way ahead of us, that we can always improve in the way we're treating animals and the way we're treating human animals as well. And that we can deepen our understanding, because we've all been wounded by being raised in this society. And so it's really a journey of self-discovery more than anything, I think, and a way of giving back to the world on top of it.
Yeah, I think you've almost answered my next question. This is a journey, but I'll ask anyway. What would you tell people who are still struggling? They have all the answers. They know what to do. They don't need any more information on phytonutrients and vitamins and nutrient density. They know the answers. They get the ethical connection, and yet they're still struggling.
Yeah.
Maybe it's food addiction or habit, whatever it is. What would you say? What would you tell them?
Well, essentially, there's a great saying by Goethe. He says, "To know and not to do is not to know." So I think,
Uh-huh.
people say they know, but really, I mean, the proof really is in the pudding. So I think making this such a big change in one's life, it seems like a little thing, like, okay, I'm going to not eat meat and dairy anymore. Like, what's the big deal?
Yeah.
Uh, and yet it has overtones that just radiate into our whole self-identity and into our relationships with other people.
Yeah.
And so that's where the resistance is. I think resistance isn't so much in veganism, it's mainly in other people. There's other people around that are going to be upset with this very often.
Yeah.
That's, very often it's one's partner, one's colleagues, somebody, fears, vague or very specific fears that are hard to address. Also, there can be, I think, um, in a sense, old relationships with one's parents, issues that have not been resolved. For example, I think if someone really has not healed their relationship, perhaps with their mother, in a healthy way, they feel guilty if they don't eat their mother's food, even though their mother may be passed
Mm.
away and gone, but they still feel like, no, I that would be wrong for me. They're not aware of it. A lot of
Right.
these things operate, I think, at unconscious levels or subconscious levels.
Right.
And there's just a sense of, I shouldn't do it. It's not right. But there's also, I think, still so much misinformation that's passing as valid information in the general public, in the general world that we're all living in. And so
Right.
it's very easy, it's almost unavoidable to listen to other people or to read in the newspaper or magazine or television somewhere that veganism is dangerous, or you may have to be careful to get enough nutrients. You better have a little fish to be sure you get your omega-3s. You better have a little meat just to cover all your bases. Eat a balanced diet. This is so pervasive still that it keeps people, I think, just in the habit, because that way it's comfortable. All they can go and have a little chicken with everybody at the office, and it just makes their life, because people feel in many ways overwhelmed, and they've got enough problems, enough challenges, and they don't want to add something else on top of that. Plus there's the whole idea of convenience, the whole idea of this is what I know how to make, plus the whole idea of taste. This is what tastes so good, I'm used to this. All
Right.
these things, so I think one has to really sort of drill down in one's understanding and understand really clearly that when I take out my wallet and pay for meat, dairy products, and eggs, I am paying someone somewhere to impregnate a female against her will and steal her baby and kill the baby and kill her. And this is what I'm paying for. If I stop paying for it,
Right.
it's going to stop. And if I don't stop paying for it, it's not going to stop, because paying
Right.
for it makes it happen. And then I don't just do that. I turn around and I eat that and I feed that to my children. And so, is this really how I want to build the tower of my life, of this physical body, with bricks of misery and violence? To really understand this and to see clearly that there are no nutrients in animal foods that we need to be healthy. That, to understand at a deep level this wonderful truth that all of us have been given a gift of a physical body that does not require any animal to suffer to get any of the nutrients that we need to be healthy. To understand that also we've been born into a society where we've been forced from infancy to refuse that gift, and that programming is very deep, and it's not our fault. We're born into a system that's already running. It was, when we're born here, we're born into a system that's already killing billions of animals every day, and we're trained to participate in that.
Right.
So we have to understand that and just realize that it's, in a sense, it's harder than giving up cigarettes or something, because we're not all have a cigarette stuck in our mouth when we're only 1 year old, So,
Mhm.
but we do with animal foods, and it's constantly told to us by everybody that we need, this is for our own good. This is where we get our protein. Protein's such a positive word, protein.
Mhm.
What could be bad about
Mhm.
protein? So
Right.
this is the thing. These programs go very deeply into our consciousness, and I think that's why meditation is important. Really cleaning out our, doing a cleanse. I think actually a food cleanse is very helpful, because when we do a food cleanse and just eat perhaps just fruits and vegetables and maybe some juice, or maybe fast for a week or something and then start eating food again. When we come back, we've not only cleansed our bodies cleaner, but some of those old memory patterns also get weakened.
Right.
And very often we act robotically. I know I still do. You know, we have programs that are implanted into our consciousness, and we just act them out. And it's important to take control of our own mind. Our minds have been colonized against our will, and to take them back. And that's why I think meditation is so important. I mean, I do at least an hour every day of just sitting and listening to my thoughts and being aware. And so
Right.
that I understand when I'm acting, if it's my thought or if it's somebody else's thought that's propelling me along. And in our society, we're not taught to
Right.
take control of our own consciousness. And I think that's the underlying challenge in many ways.
That's really very, very important. I agree with you. And really insightful. Um, tell me this, we're almost out of time, but I have this last question. It's really about health, and maybe it's cognition or physical health, but why do you think that this piece of plant-based nutrition, I'm talking ethics and morality and compassion, why is this so important for our health? Do you know?
Wow. Yeah, that's a good question. Well, when I give the talks on travel and so forth, I always try to mention briefly that I think we should expand our understanding of health. We think of health, we think of physical health,
Yeah.
to include environmental health, to include cultural health, and to also include psychological health. And then the final one of the five levels of health is spiritual or ethical health. And it's clear
Mhm.
that these are all interconnected. We can't be healthy physically if our environment is polluted and climate is upset and all these things. So environmental health, cultural health, clearly also, we need to have healthy relationships and healthy society. Psychological health, animal agriculture is really devastating in many ways to our psychological health because the attitudes
Mhm.
underlying animal agriculture are contrary to our best interests. And we're eating attitudes of domination and exploitation and might makes right, and of the domination of the feminine. I mean, we're eating all this and it goes very deeply into us. And so those are all very important dimensions of health besides our physical health, which is also harmed by the constituents of animal-based foods. But the ethical health or spiritual health, which I think in a sense are linked, I often say is the most important of all, because this is where we get in touch with our purpose, why we're on this earth. We're here for just a few years, really. We all know that. We're here
Right.
for a few decades. So our life is a gift. What do we do with the precious time that we have while
Right.
we're here? And it's important to see, I think, that uh, supporting a system of violence and of unconsciousness for the short time we're here is not helping. It's not in our best interest. We are part of the problem if we're doing that.
Right.
And who wants to live their life asleep and die without ever having lived? But that's what animal agriculture does. It takes away our own life. We become exploited. Anyone eating animal foods is being exploited, because when we're exploiting others, we don't realize it, but it boomerangs back right on us. And we end
Mhm.
up being the one who's unhealthy, physically, psychologically, culturally, environmentally. And we don't pass on a world to our children that we could. So the ethical health is where real joy and a sense of being part of a benevolent unfolding of life flowers in our consciousness. And we wake up every morning with a feeling of happiness and gratitude that I have another day to learn, to grow, to contribute in some way to helping heal the wounds in our world and in myself, and to contribute to the celebration of life on this beautiful planet. And this is where the real health, I think, comes in, because this is the health that's, in a sense, transpersonal. It's beyond just the limited, narrow range of the self-centered consciousness. We're taught in our society to only care about ourselves and get what we can, or a small group around us. But to really see that what veganism is radical inclusion in a very positive sense. It's
Yeah.
saying I'm going to include all living beings within the sphere of my kindness and concern. When we open our heart at that level, not only is it blessing others, because we'll naturally have a tendency to want to, when we see other people, send them love, when we see animals, send them love, but it comes back and we feel more and more that our life is a gift and we're grateful for it, and we're able to, in some ways, mobilize the creative and inner capacities and resources that we have in ways that we never would think of in another way. And so I just think that the ethical health is the most important. And when we look deeply into a piece of meat, we do see horrible suffering. We do hear the screams of animals and feel the pain of mutilations. This is what we're causing in eating. And so we have to shut down. And what veganism is really about, it's about opening up and not shutting down and sensitizing ourselves. And it can be excruciatingly painful. I mean, I would say it is excruciatingly painful. It's like awakening. It's like a birth. Getting born is painful, right? But it's even more painful to stay inside the womb. We would never be able to experience the world if we stayed inside the womb. Veganism, it really is a birth. It's painful, but once you go out of that womb, because most people who are still eating animal foods, they don't know they are in a womb where it's comfortable. Everyone else is doing it. But we're limited. We don't realize how we're limited until we go out and are born, and we become actually vegan, which means to create a new foundation for our life based on kindness and compassion. And it opens a whole new world that we can't imagine beforehand. We think we can, but that's kind of like to know and not to do is not to know. People say, "Oh yeah, I know all that." It's like, yeah, if you don't, you don't really know. You can't know unless you go through the pain, and then beyond the pain, to the joy of seeing, okay, I understand there's this pain happening, but it's not because of me, and I'm doing the best I can to reduce it. And there's a great joy in that, I think, and it deepens our understanding. So I think in the big picture, you've really hit the nail on the head with that point. I think that the ethical dimension is really the key to everything.
Really interesting. That was such an important piece. Thank you for sharing that. And I just like to add that pain is really brief. I think that, I mean, in the whole scheme of things, I mean, I remember that I was a cheese addict, and I went from being a cheese addict to having no cheese. And, the healing that happened within just a very short period of time was so profound that there's just no way I would ever go back. So that pain piece that people are so afraid of, I think people need to know that it's brief, and the benefits hugely outweigh, that feeling of loss.
Right. It's like we're giving up something, and then we realize later, all I gave up was disease and misery. I didn't give up anything.
Yeah, right.
So much more happiness and health, which you can't put a price on that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Tuttle. And we're at the end of our time, but I do know that you have something for our listeners, and I wondered if you could tell us about that.
Sure. Yeah, I was thinking it would be nice to offer a special offer of the World Peace Diet training. So the World Peace Diet Facilitator Training is an 8-week online self-paced course.
Wow.
And we just have it we marked down the price a lot for this, just for this summit, just for people who sign up from here. And it's something that universally people love it. It's basically going more deeply into the ideas we're talking about. It's based on reading the World Peace Diet, and then it's a whole series of videos and audios and supplemental readings over an 8-week. It's basically 8 modules. You can go quickly and do the whole thing in 4 weeks, or you can take your time and do it in 4 months, or whatever you want. But it's self-paced completely. But it is available online, and you can go to our website, worldpeacediet.com, and you can find out more there. And I think we'll have a link probably here in the show as well. But it's something where there's also a monthly phone call with me, a Q&A the third Thursday of every month. For people who have questions or just want to share ideas and thoughts. And it's being part of a whole community of people who are spreading the vegan message and including the spiritual and psychological and cultural benefits. I call it deep veganism, which is understanding the big picture of the consequences of animal agriculture and doing the best we can to help bring this message to the world. So we'd love to have anyone who's interested join us, and it's just a wonderful program.
That sounds fantastic. I think I'll be doing that. Thank you very much, Dr. Tuttle. Great to have you with us again. Thank you.
Thank you.
And all the best on your travels this year.
Right. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.